Hello and welcome to Legalese. My name is Vincent Perryman and I'm a local attorney with the law offices of J. Vincent Perryman. Each month, Legalese focuses on a wide range of legal issues and topics. Today's show covers probate law. With us now is Scott Peatross, a local attorney and the Shelby County Public Administrator. Scott, thanks for being with us today. I know you do a lot of probate, and there's always this misconception that probate is this awful, evil thing that nobody wants to go through. But it's also, the probate court does a lot more than that. Can you give us a brief overview of what the probate court does in Shelby County?
Sure, there are a lot of things. And I guess most people are familiar with the fact that when you die, typically your estate has to be probated in probate court. In addition to estates of decedents, the probate court also handles guardianships for minors. Typically that's where, or would come into being if a child inherits money, or sometimes a child will receive money after a lawsuit, then the court needs to appoint a guardian that can control the money for that child. And that's anybody under 18. So in those situations, the court will appoint a guardian for a child and then supervise the guardianship as time goes by until the child turns 18. Another thing that the probate court does is conservatorships. A conservatorship, and a lot of states are called guardianships, but in Tennessee it's called conservatorship, is a conservator is a person that is appointed to handle the affairs of a disabled adult. Typically, a conservator will be in charge of not only the disabled person's property, and be in charge of managing their property and paying their bills, but also will be in charge of their person, which is to make medical decisions or do anything else that's necessary, depending on the circumstances of the disabled person.
So as far as the mainstay of what everybody thinks of as probate is, wills and estates.
Right. And
how does that work generally down there?
In terms of opening an estate for
sure,
after someone dies, or and I also should add, in terms of what the probate court does, there's actually more than that. They also do a lot of name changes, and those are typically things that you don't need a lawyer for, as opposed to these others that we've talked about. So that's a court that, on a routine basis, we'll handle name changes for people for a variety of reasons. In addition, the probate judges also hear mental health commitments, and that's something that I'm not very familiar with. It's not actually done at the probate court. It's done at a mental health facility. To answer your question, how are estates handled? At some point after someone dies, there's usually a need to dispose of their property. They're going to have bank accounts, a car, investment accounts, and people typically also have creditors. And it could just be a few bills that weren't paid at the time of their death, or there could be a lot of debt. And the probate court is designed as a forum where someone's affairs can be wrapped up in an orderly way after they die, as opposed to whoever can grab the property first. So in a situation where there's a will, the court sees to it that the will is followed. If there's not a will, then the court sees to it that the property is ultimately distributed in according to Tennessee's intestate succession laws, which is just a law that all states have that says where your property goes if you don't have a will. And it's just to what family members your property goes.
Mm-hmm. Now, the one thing that I see a lot of times is, if a will is left behind, I'll have someone come to me and say, well, I'm the executor. Why can't I just go ahead and wrap all this up without the court?
Right. And that happens a lot. I think there are a lot of people that think that here's my dad's will, it says I'm the executor, so I just get busy and go ahead and distribute things the way the will says. Well, even though that happens, it shouldn't, because unless the court actually appoints you, unless the probate court appoints you as the executor. It doesn't matter what the will says. You don't have any authority to deal in a deceased person's property until the court appoints you. And the court will issue a sheet of paper to you that's called letters of administration or letters testamentary, which is the official document that says that you're the person that has the authority to handle that estate.
And I guess the one thing there is part of what the probate court's job is to make sure that that is the true and correct copy of the will.
That's right. Yeah, and that's a good point. There are a lot of occasions where people have more than one will, and just because I have this will, I might not know that 2 years after this one was signed, Dad actually signed another one that supersedes this. And by going through the probate process, that the will is going to be admitted to probate. If there is another one that's later, everybody has notice of the fact that this one's been probated, and a later will could be brought to the attention of the court.
And then I guess the other thing is sometimes too we see, and these are rarer than what the public would believe, where you've got a contest over the will as far as whether or not there's undue influence.
That's
or
right.
Something like that. How do those normally run?
Well, the probate court provides a forum for resolving those disputes because, to use the example that I referred to a second ago, if I have one will but somebody else has one that's later, then there may be some disagreement among the relatives about whether that later will is valid. Someone may say, well, Dad had Alzheimer's and he really didn't know what he was doing when he was signing the later will. So probate court, without getting into too much detail, if there's some uncertainty about whether the will is legitimate, you can file a will contest, which ultimately will result in the court making a ruling about whether a particular will is a valid will or not. And there are several things that can make a will not valid.
Well, we'll come back from our break and we'll discuss what can make a will not valid. We'll continue our discussion about probate law when we return.